When I walked into the bar on Friday, I noticed Jack almost immediately and went over to give him that awkward hug that men do. "Damn, Jack," I exclaimed. 10 years have passed, but I still recognized you right away. You haven't changed a bit." "Like you," he replied. "I heard that you got married. It sounds like family life is good for you." We found an office in a quiet corner and ordered a couple of beers. We were roommates and good friends in college, but we drifted apart after graduation. Jack got a job in another city, but I stayed in Chicago. We pretty much lost touch with each other until I found out by chance that he had moved back here a couple of years ago to take a job in the trade. "And how are you?" I asked. "Why didn't you get married?" I remembered that Jack had been on quite an active search back in college. He never had problems with girlfriends, but he never seemed to stay with them for long. "I guess I'm not as lucky as you," he said with a smile, but when he spoke, there seemed to be a hint of pain in his eyes. I tried to lighten the mood. "It's all your problem, playboys," I joked. "Having started searching, you can't stop." It was clear from the expression on his face that my joke offended him. He shook his head grimly. "Oh, I tried to find a wife, but when it came to the greatest love in the world, I was disastrously unlucky." "Any problems?" "It's funny that you should ask," he said. I could tell that something was really bothering him, so I sat comfortably in the office and said, "Why don't you tell me about it?" He signaled to the waitress to bring us another one each, and after she did so, he began his story. It all started about a month ago. The day started off crazy, which is normal in the commodities market. But around noon, my boss walked in with a woman in tow. "This is Carla," he said. "She will work in your area. I want you to show her everything and help her get started." I must say that when I looked at her, something happened to me. I have dated many attractive women, but none of them have ever had such an impact on me as this one. It was strange. She wasn't beautiful by model standards, and her clothes weren't particularly revealing, but something about her just swept me off my feet. I never believed in love at first sight, or the idea that there is only one woman for a man. But Carla made me feel like a teenage boy for the first time. It was amazing and confusing, and I felt completely helpless. I sat down with her to discuss what she needed to know about the job here. It didn't take me long to see that she was very bright and incredibly attractive. It's a combination that has always fascinated me. While talking, I tried not to look at her, but I think I didn't always succeed. She didn't seem to care. She just listened intently to everything I had to say, taking notes in her notebook. After spending some time with her, I suggested we do a little work on our own. "And then we can have lunch together and I'll answer any questions you have," I told her. "I usually don't go on dates with my office colleagues. It creates problems. But I already knew that in the case of Carla, I was going to break my rule. Over lunch, I hope to learn more about her. I have already noted that she is not wearing a wedding ring, but it looked like it might be in her past, so I assumed she was divorced. However, while we were eating, I was unable to find out more about her because she only wanted to talk about me and what I was doing at work. When an attractive woman keeps asking questions about you, it's hard not to feel flattered. And before I knew it, lunch was over. Even though I didn't get to know Carla any better, I really enjoyed being with her. Things took a turn for the worse that day when Hank Malone walked in. Hank is my biggest competitor at work. We were accepted at the same time and our careers ran parallel. But Hank didn't think so. He always boasted about his achievements, and he always had some big job that supposedly would bring him a fat bonus. His selfishness is also not limited to work. He likes to show off his sexual conquests and is not shy about going on dates with people at work. From what I can tell, he attracted the attention of a number of women in the office, leaving a few broken hearts in the process. So I wasn't happy when Hank suddenly showed up and introduced himself to Carla. "If you need to know anything, just come to me," he said in his loud voice. "I am closely connected with senior management, so if you need anything, I can arrange it." I gritted my teeth at his obvious ploy, but I couldn't say anything about how I felt. That wouldn't make me sound like a jealous schoolboy. To make matters worse, Carla seemed to believe it without question. She thanked him warmly and promised to call. Trading goods can get quite tiring, and for many of us, it is common practice to pop into the nearby pub after work to relax before heading home. I mentioned this to Carla, and she agreed to come. So after we closed deals for the day, I took Carla to our favorite wet spot and introduced her to the rest of the gang. Everything was going well until Frank showed up. He made his way through the group, sat down next to Carla, and continued to monopolize her attention. Even with all the chatter in the pub, it was easy to hear Frank boasting about himself and his bright prospects. Moreover, Carla seemed to hang on his every word. But before she left, Carla leaned over and thanked me for making me feel welcome on my first day on the job. It made me feel a little better. The rest of the week went much the same. Carla and I didn't have lunch together every day, but we often took a coffee break together. Likewise, on some days, Carla didn't go to the pub with us. But when she did, she was an avid listener, only tuning in to ask an insightful question. Of course, Hank continued to hover around her like a bee around a flower. It should have been clear to Carla that he was stalking her, but she didn't try to discourage him. They calmed me down. One day we visited the toilet at the same time, and he did not miss the opportunity to tell me his claims on Carla. "She's eating from my hands," he shouted. "I'll be giving her a tour of my bedroom soon, if you know what I mean," he said with a grin. In a strange way, I found Hank's boasting reassuring. The way he spoke showed that Carla had not succumbed to his intrusive processing, which made me think that I still had a chance with her. In fact, I felt that my relationship with Carla was growing, although it was happening in a strange way. For example, at first she showed great interest in me, my work and my lifestyle, always encouraging me to talk about myself. She probably knew more about me than a few old girlfriends I'd been dating for months. However, despite her interest, she seemed reserved and cautious towards me, as if she could not stop being cautious. I was going crazy trying to figure out what I had said or done to cause this reaction. But after a while, to my great relief and admiration, her attitude seemed to change significantly. She began to relax and seemed to feel much more at ease with me. I began to pick up on some of those little cues that a woman uses when she speaks. "I'm wondering if I like you." This would all be very encouraging if it weren't for the fact that she kept paying too much attention to Hank. I couldn't understand it. We'd just had a great little conversation, and then when Hank shows up, she drops everything to listen to him. Of course, Hank never missed an opportunity to rub my nose in how much time Carla spent with him. "Face it, buddy, you may be her friend, but she gets her pleasure from me. I'm going to have my nose up her skirt in no time. Just wait and see," he boasted. I didn't believe him, but I couldn't deny that Carla seemed to divide her time between the two of us. I'm not stupid when it comes to women. I know how to make them laugh, how to flatter them without being obvious, flirt without being rude, and generally how to interact with them in a way that keeps them interested. I agree to admit that I used all my tricks on Carla to attract her attention to me. In the past, when I did this, it was kind of a game for me, but with Carla, everything was deadly serious. Before, I didn't care if I won or lost, but now it felt like a matter of life and death, and I desperately wanted to keep this relationship alive. What made things even more confusing was that all the usual signs I was getting from her were that my efforts were working, that she was responding positively to my romantic advances. But she still didn't let Hank resign. One day, I learned from my office sources that Hank asked Carla out on a date and she turned him down. I decided it was time to make my own move. If nothing else, then at least I can understand whether Carla is really interested in me or not. So late in the evening, I went to her workplace. "Hey, Carla," I said casually, "why don't you and I grab something to eat after work?" "With a gang in a pub?" she asked. "No, just you and me," I said. "I want to talk about something, but the pub is too noisy." "I don't know if this is a good idea," she answered hesitantly. "It's exactly the same as if we went out with the rest of the gang," I assured her. "It'll just be a little easier to talk." "Okay," she said, and I had to try my best not to jump up and down in excitement at the prospect of being alone with her. I took her to a great place nearby, very quiet and discreet. Candles on the table, nice but not too fancy. Over dinner, we talked a little about the office and our responsibilities. I then gradually moved on to discuss how well she fit into our group, how much she contributed to our work, and how much everyone liked her. I could tell she liked it. I then went on to talk about how much I enjoyed working with her, how she made the job easy, and how sweet she smiled and laughed. "The thing is, Carla, it's hard for me to think of you as a colleague," I told her sincerely. "In fact, I want to get to know you better because I have feelings for you." She quietly exclaimed, "Oh," and instinctively reached out her hand to grab mine and squeeze it. But then a conflicted expression appeared on her face, and she let me go. "I really like you too, Jack, but I don't know if this is a good idea. There are a lot of things you don't know about me, things that might make you feel different about me." Now I reached across the table and took her hands in mine. "I don't care what you had in the past," I said seriously. "I see you every day at work, and I know what kind of person you are. I also know how I feel when I'm around you." Her eyes were bright, and for a moment I thought she was going to lean over the table and seal the deal with a kiss. But at the last moment, she seemed to regain control of herself and retreated. "I can't deny that I've been thinking about you a lot too," she said, "but it all happens too quickly for me to realize. Please don't put pressure on me. Give me some time." I looked into her eyes. "I'll wait as long as you want," I promised. "You're worth waiting for." Again, I thought she was going to say something, but again I held back. Soon after this, she went home. Did I just take a giant step forward or completely blow things up? I was surprised when I returned by taxi to my apartment. The next day, of course, she went to lunch with Hank, and I gritted my teeth in disappointment as I continued to eat my sandwich at my desk. On Friday night, we all returned to the pub, and the drinks were flowing a little more freely than usual in celebration of the very successful deal we had managed to secure. As the evening wore on, more and more people left until Carla and I were left alone. I think I drank too much because I did what I promised myself not to do, not to put pressure on Carla. "You don't know me," she said slightly unintelligibly. "I'm not the woman you think about. I know exactly what kind of woman you are. You are the most amazing, attractive woman I have ever met, and I couldn't ask for more," I said firmly. Then, with a mixture of emotion and intoxication, I grabbed her by the neck, pulled her towards me, and kissed her hard on the lips. She struggled for a second. Then her whole body seemed to give in. She leaned towards me and kissed me back with equal fervor. Our tongues explored each other, and we enjoyed the sensuality of the moment until some wise man at another table joked about us going to our room. Carla stepped back and looked at me worriedly. "Jack, I need to go." She hurried off, leaving me to sit and wonder what had just happened. Whatever it was, I decided I was more determined than ever. That kiss told me more about her true feelings than anything she had said or done. The next week I gave her time without talking to her much. I caught her looking at me a few times, but acted like I didn't notice. Let her feel what it's like to be unsure of what's going on, I thought. I decided I would make my move on Thursday, and she made it easy for me. After lunch, she approached me, and it was clear that she was not the confident, knowledgeable woman I was used to. "Jack, about what happened last Friday, I'm sorry if I—" "Not here," I interrupted her. "If you want to talk, let's do it over dinner." I threw her off balance, and she hesitated slightly. Then she seemed to make a decision, and her eyes signaled agreement. "Okay," she said, "at dinner." I didn't answer, but inside I was delighted. When the workday finally ended, I walked over to her workstation. "Are you ready?" I asked briefly, and she nodded obediently. I took her hand and led her out of the building to the curb, where I hailed a taxi. She got in without hesitation, and we drove in silence most of the way. Finally, she looked around and asked, "Where are we going?" "To my home," I said. "I'll cook dinner for you." She nodded as if this was what she had been expecting all along. When we reached my building, I took her arm, and she allowed me to lead her without protest. We rode in the elevator in silence. When I led her into my apartment and closed the door, She looked at me with a combination of agreement and anticipation, and I had no choice. I hugged her and kissed her passionately. If anything, she returned the kiss with even more passion. Then we would tear each other's clothes off, desperately trying to establish as much contact with each other as possible. With every piece of clothing she shed, the body that revealed itself confirmed the sensual promise that I knew was within her from our first meeting. Simply put, she was the most desirable woman I had ever seen. Oddly enough, it wasn't her breasts, her thighs, or her legs in particular that bothered me the most. Most likely, it was their combination that created such an attractive woman. We left clothes scattered all over the floor when I brought her into my bedroom. Once there, we had mind-blowing sex. "My God, what are you doing to me?" she whispered. "You're driving me crazy." Finally, exhausted, I sank down next to her. We lay there, side by side, for a minute or two, and then I turned to her and began to kiss her tenderly. She eagerly returned my kisses, and we hugged for a long time. Then I rolled and got out of bed. "Wait here," I said, and went to my table in the living room. When I returned, I brought a small box. "This is for you," I said. She looked worried. "I can't accept a gift from you, Jack," she said. "Just look," I begged. Opening the box, she found a thin gold necklace with a small ornament made of 2 different metals skillfully intertwined on a chain. "This is amazing," she said. "What is this?" "This is a Celtic knot. The 2 threads intertwine, forming an endless loop. I bought it because it makes me think about how you are intertwined in my life. Everything reminds me of you, and I can't help the fact that I constantly think about you." She held her breath. "This is wonderful, Jack, but I cannot." I interrupted her. "It's a common enough design that wearing it won't mean anything to anyone, but you'll know what it means to me." I told her. "Please put it on for me." I took it from her, wrapped it around her neck, and fastened it. She stood up and walked to the mirror to look at him. "It's really beautiful," she muttered. Then she turned and kissed me. "Thanks, Jack." Suddenly, her eyes fell on my bedside clock, and she gasped. "Damn, I lost track of time. I have to get home. Tomorrow will be a busy day." She quickly got dressed and headed to the door, stopping to kiss me and thank me again for the necklace and for this evening. When she left, I felt a strange combination of elation at the deepening of our relationship and disappointment at her departure. It was no longer possible to deny that I had fallen deeply in love with her. The next day I came to work with a happy heart, wanting to see her again. I arrived early, but she was still not there even after the usual start time. Once it became obvious that this was not a few minutes late, I became paranoid. Was she upset about what happened last night? Has she decided she doesn't want to see me anymore? Did she quit her job? I didn't feel any better when Hank came in and quickly resumed his wild boasting. I listened to him absent-mindedly until he said, "Hey, guess what happened? Carla asked me to meet her here this morning. Sorry, Jack. Looks like the best man has won again." Before I could think about what he said and what it meant, Carla stepped through the doorway. Behind her was a man in a wrinkled suit and a Chicago police uniform. A man in a suit approached Hank and me and asked, "Which one of you is Hank Malone?" Hank stared at him in surprise. "I'm Hank Malone. Who the hell are you?" The man pulled back his jacket to reveal a badge pinned to an inside pocket. "I'm Detective Richard O'Brien of the Chicago Police Department. You have been arrested on charges of fraud and insider trading. You have the right to a lawyer. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court." As a uniformed policeman stepped forward to handcuff him, Hank began shouting, "It's bullshit! I didn't do anything! You can't arrest me!" His words had no effect on either of the 2 officers who led the protesting mediator to the door. Detective turned to Carla and said, "Thanks for everything. We'll be in touch." I could hear Hank screaming down the hall. I turned to Carla in shock. "What happened now?" "Please sit down, Jack, and let me explain. I told you that I'm not the woman you think I am. I'm an investigator for a security firm that specializes in white-collar crime. Your company contacted us to help identify the source of some suspicious trading they discovered. We agreed to send an undercover investigator, and that's how I came to work here." She looked at me apologetically. "You won't like this part, Jack. We had 2 suspects, you and Hank, so I was asked to spend as much time as possible with both of you to try to determine which of you was involved in the crimes. I felt all the happiness flow out of me. So, all the time we spent together, what we said last night, it was all just pretend." "No," she said decisively. "At first I wasn't sure about you, but after a week it became obvious that you were clean." She looked at the floor. "I should have turned my attention to Hank at that moment, but I discovered that I really liked you and didn't want to stop spending time with you. Besides, it was obvious how you felt about me, and I don't think there's a single woman alive who doesn't enjoy being desired. You were sweet, funny, and sexy, and I didn't want to lose that." She lowered her head. "Anyway, the point is that I lied to you. I let you think I was one thing when I was something else entirely. I won't blame you if you hate me. They say that hope cast into the earth will be born again. I knew I could feel it growing within me." "But do you have feelings for me?" I asked. "Did you feel the same way as me?" She nodded. "Then none of this matters," I shouted. "I don't care if you're a cop or a commodity trader or whatever, I just want to be with you. Now that you have completed your investigation, you no longer need to pretend. There is nothing more that can separate us." With these words, I went up and kissed her deeply, and she kissed me and clung to me with the same passion. But after we released our embrace, she still couldn't look at me. "There's something else," she said, almost in a whisper. "I'm married. I have a husband and a house in the suburbs." I staggered. The wind knocked the wind out of me. Now she had a tense expression on her face. "I have feelings for you, Jack, and I'd be lying if I didn't admit that last night was wonderful. But I still love my husband, and I can't just leave him. I have to go back and work on our marriage, try to rekindle the feelings I had for him. I just have to, Jack." She stood up. "I'm so sorry, Jack. I'm sorry for everything. The best thing you can do is forget about me and find someone you can love, and more importantly, trust. I'm not that woman. At least I tried to warn you." She walked towards the door, but then turned back with a look of shame on her face. "My name isn't even Carla," she said, and left. Jack drained his beer and placed the mug on the table. "That's why I said I have the greatest love in the world." I was stunned. "So when did all this happen?" He shook his head in despair. "This morning. She left my life this very morning." As I drove, I couldn't stop thinking about Jack's story. When I got home, I didn't feel like eating, so I took a beer out of the refrigerator and sat down, waiting for Bella. She's been working a lot lately, so I rarely found her at home. Finally, I heard her car pull into the garage. When she walked through the door and saw me, she smiled and said, "Oh dear, what a day I had. But I have good news for you. We have finally finished this big project that I have been working on for so long. I won't be so busy anymore." I didn't answer. "Actually," she continued, "this is what I want to talk to you about. I think I might quit my job. I've been really feeling exhausted lately, and I know I've been neglecting you. We need to spend more time together, take that vacation we've been putting off. Maybe we could even talk about having kids like you wanted." This is all starting to sound very attractive to me. When I didn't answer, Bella said, with an apologetic expression on her face, "See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm chatting about my work and my problems, and I haven't even asked you about your day. This is something I'm going to work on to really pay attention to you like I did when we first got married." I think that my silence became alarming for her, and she began nervously fiddling with her finger on the small Celtic knot hanging on a chain around her neck. "So you met up with your old college roommate today? Has anything interesting happened in his life?" she asked. I stood up and folded my arms over my chest. I said, in a voice full of bitterness and despair, "It's funny that you ask about this. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one."